He had to be. But anything they put in our newspapers, anything they put on TV, we will immediately believe is true. Look at the lies they tell. And you believe it. And now you don't even have to read any longer. Your children don't have to read. They interpret everything for us. Let's watch the 6 o'clock news, see what's happening. You will see what ain't happening. These are some of the things I'm telling you about are very simple. So your task, what is your task? Everybody asks, what should I do? You must begin to get into groups with each other. Begin to do this discussion. How is it that I can come to Seattle and you all come out and hear me, and yet you won't come out and talk to each other? And what is that? I mean, what is it? What is it about us that we can't get together and get our own differences? Why is it that everybody can get us together but ourselves? Mental side. Mental side keeps us from trusting each other. Mental side divides us. It's a planned program. And let me tell you something before I be under any illusion. Under any illusion. I have a great deal of respect for the white race. They look out for themselves. I ain't got no problem with that. Don't think no fools held us in check for no 362 years. No fools held this great race of ours down for no 300. They're smart people. Don't play them cheap. Don't play them cheap. We have a very formidable enemy here. And they're very amenable and very nice. How are you? Can I help you with your bag? How do that? Let's understand this. We're not dealing with no people who curse you out, who make you mad. On the contrary, they'll make you feel better. Bobby, they're better friends than my black. Yeah. That's mental side. And we must become that way. We must become civil. We must become, how are you? How are you doing? Thank you very much for opening this door. Can I help you with that? The objective is to win. We got to win. We're talking about winning now. We're not talking about, in a horse race, you can win, place, and show. Most blacks want to show. I want to win. I said, the other thing we must do, the whites have written our history in blood. Are writing our history in blood. We must at least write theirs in ink. You must begin to write. You must begin to write about your experiences and put them in your Bible. Put them in your books. Pass them on to your children. Say, pass this on. Pass this on. One thing we've found out, the oral tradition does not work. It gets distorted. We must write down what's happening to us. Because the history they're writing in this university has nothing to do with reality. Nothing to do with reality. And so, in ending, I would like to say, so we can take some questions, that I really appreciate the type of love you've shown me throughout the years. If you think that tonight I was showing you something that there is no hope, then that's not true. You misunderstood. It's just that the only way, I was telling the brothers tonight about, I rarely quote other people, because that's the problem. Every time you look up, brothers and sisters are quoting somebody else other than black people. But Fanon said it, and I like to quote Fanon because he is black, but there comes a time when silence is dishonest. When silence is dishonest. And we cannot remain silent any longer. I realize what's happening now around the country now with people like me and others is we're becoming isolated. There's a move on now to divide the black community along class levels. To tell black people that the problem is not race, it's class. That those bourgeois blacks up there have more in common with whites than they have with you at the bottom. And it's a thing that we're going to have to deal with. We cannot ignore it any longer. Books are being written by it. And it's going to especially affect the black student, because the black student is a paradox. The black student finds himself on a college campus where he is being trained to be a professional. And the strange thing about it is, very ones who give you the class analysis Guess who they quote? They quote people like Castro, who
I'm American.
Alive. In nature we trust, 'cause nature is us. From death to birth, one nature, one earth. Been found, lost and found in the USA. We've been up and down, but we're here to stay. Americans reawaken. I'm here now, hear me now. We've been found, lost and found in the USA. We've been up and down, but we're here to stay. Here to stay, here to stay, here to stay. Back to nature. Time for us to heal. Time for us to rise. Time for us to feel. We're living more than life. Time to face our fear. Time to give up. Time to make it clear. I'm a weekend, still here. We've been found, lost and found in the USA. We've been up and down, but we're here to stay. I'm a weekend, reawaken. I'm here now, hear me now. We've been found, lost and found in the USA. We've been up and down, but we're here to stay. I'm a weekend, here to stay, here to stay. American.
Today is Thursday, July 17th, and I would like to get everybody's what they thought of that song. The person in the back, could you mute your phone, please, from the noise? Thank you. The song you just heard was Lost and Found by Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. He's going to be joining us tonight. That was a nice cut. That was nice. It's Thursday, July 17th. I'm just in awe. Thursday, July 17th, 2014. Welcome to another edition of African Americans Ain't African, the talk show that proves without a shadow of a doubt that the so-called African American didn't find his way to America stuffed in the trunk of a ship. I'm your host, Buck Wylam. Tonight, We're going to be joined by Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, and we're going to hit a subject that's very important in our community, and it's called critical thinking. Before we get into that, let's get into what came on before Dr. Mumbo Jumbo's song, and that was Dr. Bobby Wright talking about menticide. And I hope these little Bobby Wright pieces are helping you out to get a clearer picture on what's happening to us. And one thing that Dr. Bobby Wright hit on is that we have to win. We have to go into this. I know we see all this stuff going on in the community, but we got to have another mindset, and we got to look at things differently. And we have to look at ourselves as the victor. Always. Joining me tonight, as always, my co-host Rick Moon. Rick, how you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Buck. I want to say hello to all the people out there listening tonight. Good to have Dr. Mumbo Jumbo back again to give us some more of his knowledge. So I'm ready.
So, man, what you think about that song he put out?
It was on, man. It was on. I'm gonna have to listen to it again because I didn't really make out all of the lyrics, but I caught some of it though, and yeah, I like the song.
See, man, that's what you get for listening to the Beatles and Rod Stewart and stuff like that.
You know.
Also joining me tonight will be Nisi. Hi, Nisi. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? How's everybody doing?
Oh, I'm well. Everything is well. What'd you think of Dr. Mumbo Jumbo's song?
I liked it. The beat is catchy, and I'm like Rick. I got to listen to the words a little bit more, and I'll be doing that. But I really liked it, and it resonates with you. We're soul people. That's what part of our heritage and our name means. And I'm looking forward to Dr. Mumbo Jumbo laying some knowledge down.
Well, here at African Americans Ain't African, you've heard us refer to the term American a lot. Last time he was here, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo introduced that word to us, and we've been using it. We're trying to get it into our lexicon, and it has been a very, very positive. I think everybody who uses it has a very positive outlook, or it helps. It's like you were saying, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, when you were introducing the word. You're trying to shake that soul. So without any further ado, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, how are you? And welcome to African Americans Ain't African.
Halido, Buck, everyone. I'm doing great.
Cool, man. So tell us about the song, man. That was nice.
Oh, man. Brother, man, I've been working on this Soul People Project song with some songs for Americans for, a couple years, man. And just had some setbacks and stuff like that, but I was determined that I was going to get one song out, man. Just put it out, and, just improve from there. But for people that didn't understand the lyrics, the verse is, find the truth hidden our family tree. You want proof, how about you and me? Spirit don't change, only rearrange. From death to birth, one nature, one earth. We've been lost and found in the USA. We've been up and down, but we're here to stay. Americans reawakening, coming back home to nature. The second verse is, ancestral dreams keep us alive, like rivers and streams keep Great Lakes alive. So it's basically a song that was inspired, given to me by the ancestors. Again, when my ancestor Powell Tree gave me the knowledge, the revelation of Americans, as I was seeking the question, I was thinking, what term can I use to define us? How can we self-identify, with our habitat? Because of the things that most of us know that happened in colonization, because of the marginalization and the diminishing of the original copper-colored families, and sort of the rise of the BIA nations, the rise of the colonials, the rise of the immigrants, and all that other stuff like that. The worst thing of that is our loss of identity, our loss of language, and our loss of everything. But I was getting comfort from the ancestors, and they were saying, well, you know what? It's just because you lost the syntax and the grammar, you'll never lose the meaning of our words. And then that's when he sort of showed me how I was studying the etymology of the word America. And in studying that, I learned that just about every nation that existed at the time on Earth had their own origin story for America. Now, the one that got most popularized was the one that Vespucci did, because he wrote it down. But just about the English, the Dutch, the German, the French, Portugal, everybody had their own origin story for that. There was also a story, though, that there was some people in Central America who first came up with the term, and that's where Vespucci got it from them, when he identified a mountain range that was full of gold. And they were seeking, well, where'd you get all these gold utensils from? He said, oh, Amerique, those mountains up there. And so that's basically when they start, thinking that this was the land of gold and milk and honey and going back there. And just because of the way names for places evolve, you can't be in England. You can't go to Italy and write your name on a map and say this is what it's called, and then think everybody over there is going to start calling it that. It just doesn't work like that. Names of places grow up organically, and that's how they're done. And so, when I was looking at America, I speak French and I also speak Spanish. And so then I just, one day I was talking, meditating and stuff. I was like, oh, if I split this and use it as a Latin base, because English is Germanic, then it split very easily into Ama and then Rica, which made me think of Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, and things like that. And I know Rica means rich place, and Rica means rich people. And so then in Spanish, Ama is past tense for the word loved. So if I just did the whole word in Spanish, it was loved, rich people. But one day I forgot what that meant, and I was looking it up, and I happened to stumble across a French dictionary, because I forgot most of my French, because I don't need to speak French that much. And then I remembered that in French, ama means soul. And then that's when it just all came together, because like I said, the project I'm working on is called Soul People Project. And I already know that we are the soul people. We're the original soul people in the habitat of the Americas. And our gift of soul power, our emotional energy, is our biggest contribution, not only to the families of humanity, but also to all the habitats of the earth. And it's just like your physical body. Your eyes have a different purpose than your nose. Your nose has a different purpose than your knee. Your knees have a different purpose than, your hair. And it's the same way with Mama Earth. For Mama Earth to be balanced and work be healthy, state of well-being, all of her life systems have to function according to their design and, in the way they're designed and sometimes where they were designed,
Yes.
And so us being the soul people, that's what it is. And that's sort of where the American came from. And I'm so happy that it resonated. Because I know when I said it, it made me feel better. That was one of the best gifts I got. Having a name that's on a map. I can look at a map and see the letters, right. Even though whatever. And I can tell people that's great. So I love that. I love that that's spreading. And I'll just hope it continues to be spread more and more and become more empowering.
I'm sure it will. You're going to be seeing it. So. And hearing it, because it does resonate with the people. Now, what we want to talk about tonight was the importance of critical thinking. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, what you just said, we are energy people. Our purpose on this, we have an energy that it looks like the energy is being dissipated. How important is critical thinking into harnessing that soul energy? How is important is critical thinking into harnessing that and using it as something that would be good for the group?
What I'm going to be talking about tonight is like sort of an introduction to mumbo jumbo, because a lot of the concepts and a lot of the stuff in the framework, the way I sort of organize stuff, there's some basic principles. And if you understood those, then some of the stuff I say from this perspective will make more sense. And my goal, sort of with the mumbo jumbo framework, is to have another framework that is different than colonialism, and it's at least, for the main thing, it's useful for recognizing, resisting, and replacing colonial thinking.
So tell us, what is mumbo jumbo?
Mumbo jumbo, the simplest definition, if you want to get the basic simplest definition, is that mumbo jumbo is the stuff is made of. Now, that sounds simple, but it's really not. So, everything, now, again, mumbo jumbo, if I want to get a little more, I'll give you the advanced definition. The advanced definition is that mumbo jumbo is a dimensional, dynamic framework for understanding the nature of existence. Okay? So, everything, so the intention that turns possibilities into reality, that kernel of intention, to me, in that framework, I call it mumbo jumbo.
So I'm listening.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm here.
No, so mumbo jumbo is that energy or that catalyst that looks at a possibility and says, and what a creator does, when the creator sees a possibility they want to be a reality, they apply their mumbo jumbo to it, that intention, that will, that oomph. And then do that, when they add the critical doing to that intention, followed up on that, then that's when those realities come to play. So really, when we talk about the critical skills that you really need to combat colonialism, you need critical knowing, critical thinking, and critical doing. But tonight, I'm pretty much just going to be giving an overview of the critical thinking, because I think critical thinking is going to be an easier bridge for most people where we are, because the critical knowing is sort of, how closely you resonate with that sort of depends on how much time you spend in the habitat, in nature, how much time you spend with your ancestors and stuff like that. And so I know it's hard to do, or it's not common to do in sort of our colonial paradigm. So critical thinking is where we're going to start.
Okay, so what are some of the critical thinking skills that people who are living in cities or not living close to nature or living in like that colonial paradigm, what are some of the skills that they could learn or use?
Well, I think one of the most important things, or the place to start, is that you really have to get that everything is a story. So you put everything as a story. So everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that beginning is the context. That middle is sort of a conflict. There's always a conflict. And the end is the resolution or that. So, and leveraging, and this is how our brains work. And colonialism knows that. And so that's why they're always telling us stories. Like you always say, like the stories about the ships, all the ships bringing the hundreds of millions of people,
right.
From overseas. They always create stories. They always create narratives, because the way humanity works is that any intention that we do requires a story. So anytime you do anything intentional, it's based on a story that you're telling yourself, that you're rehearsing. So once you recognize, so if you see all of your behaviors that you're doing, if you see things that you don't like personally and you see things collectively, being able to realize that it's just a story. Now, so when I say just a story, it is a story, and that you can choose to tell yourself a different story.
So how do we do that?
Well, the first thing you have to do is recognize it's a story. So sometimes some of our behaviors that we'll tell ourselves that, like, for example, everything's so bad that we'll never come out of it. That they got all the money, they got all the resources, and we can never win. We'll never survive. We're going to be wiped off the face of the earth. All those are stories.
Yes.
And those are stories that those are stories that the colonial people, the invaders, those are the stories they want us to rehearse. You know, there's a story that, like the story that we're a race of humans, that we're not a habitat. Like I said last week, that's one of the most detrimental stories. We were told a story that we're not inseparable from the habitat. And once we accepted a story that we were a human race, that effectively, emotionally and mentally, separated us from the habitat. So all those are stories. So once you realize that those are stories, and you realize that where the origin of the story is, you can choose to tell yourself a different story. Now, and I'm going to say the other thing, so everything's a story. Now, the other thing you have to another important thing is about text, T-E-X-T, text. Because I know one of the things that the colonial people really emphasize is the written word. If you notice in their colonial system how much is driven by paper and contracts and things like that.
Yes.
And even if you say let's make a deal and stuff, you know, it's not real until they put it in writing.
Right.
Right. So this whole artificial framework that we live in, the artificial, the political, the economic, is based on T-E-X-T, text. Okay? And so there's certain things, if you want to work on, you know, combating colonial stories and the impact that they have, you have to realize what text is. Text is just a symbol. Letters are symbols that create images. So this is something else, you know, that we used to know intuitively because we grew up in nature, that this has been programmed out of us. Human beings, humanity.
Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, can you explain what is that, humanity? Could you explain what that is?
Humanity. Huwoman.
Huwoman.
For example.
Oh.
Huwoman. So just instead of saying human, I'm saying huwoman.
Got you.
You know, because this is again, this is an example of mumbo jumbo, and this is an example of how you can use mumbo jumbo to change a story.
Gotcha.
If you look at the word woman, or the word female, if you write those two words down, woman and then female, and then next to them, you write the word male and you write the word man. Now, if you look at the word male, there's no way that you can get a male and a female out of that one word. Or if you look at the word male, you can't get a female and a male out of that. But if you look at the word woman, you can get woman out of those letters, and you can also get man out of those letters. If you look at the word female, you can get female out of those letters. You can also get male out of those letters. So really, humanity is a much more natural description of the kind of species we really are.
Okay,
and so that taking that out and putting that all in the patriarchal thing is part of that whole patriarchal program. So that's just something I just started saying, you know, the last couple of weeks. Just saying, "You woman," and I'm saying that. And this is the way I'm reprogramming my mind. I'm reprogramming the story in my mind. Is that when I think of it, instead of using the word humans or humanity, I say humanity or huwoman, and that checks that colonial patriarchal programming in my mind, and I say, oh, that's not natural.
Well, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, I want to say thank you for coming, because one of the things that we're starting to see, if we have to be creative. We have to be creative, and you are definitely showing that. Area code 256-849-2227. The phone lines are packed. Anybody got any questions for Dr. Mumbo Jumbo before we get into the meat?
I have one. This is Nisi. Hi, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo.
Hey, how you doing, Sister Nisi?
All right. I wanted to get a little bit more, for you to elaborate a little bit more about the philosophy of Mumbo Jumbo. Just, you know, kind of put that out there.
Okay. Well, let me. If I give you an overview of Mumbo Jumbo, there is. I say that we're living in the Mumbo Jumbo age. You know, and there's Mumbo Jumbo economics, there's mumbo jumbo philosophy, there's mumbo jumbo that. So mumbo jumbo in itself is not a religion. Mumbo jumbo is not a religion, and mumbo jumbo is really not a philosophy. Mumbo jumbo is more a framework for understanding religion and philosophy. So mumbo jumbo is like the practice of taking something down, decomposing it down to its most fundamental, minutest level. You know, for example, like when I look at all religions and philosophies, I'll look at religion, science, all philosophies. They're all based on 4 questions. Okay? All religions and philosophies are based on 4 questions. And that's why I say mumbo jumbo isn't a philosophy. It's a way to understand philosophies, religions, and things like that. And so there are 4 questions that human come to the planet with. Our species. There are 4 questions. Any culture you go to, there are 4 questions that we have always had. And these questions, from my observations, I haven't lived in every age, and I haven't seen everything, but from my observation, these are the same 4 questions that all religion, all science, and all philosophy try to answer. And so that's to me, from my perspective, that's and those 4 questions are, the first question is, how did life begin? I don't care, whatever culture you go to, there is a story about how life began, right? The next question is, what is the purpose or meaning of life? Or why is there life? Every culture, every science, everybody's trying to answer that. What's the meaning of life? Why is there life? And then the third question is, what happens to life after physical death? Right? Now, see, the colonial people know all of this. They know that these questions are in us. These questions are in us when we come to the earth. And since they know that, they leverage that to manipulate us. And that's how they create religions, they create marketing plans, they create all these things to leverage that. Because they know no matter who you are, you have these questions and you're going to be looking for answers. And they say, okay, if they can supply the answers, they can leverage you and manipulate you to whatever they want to do. Now, the fourth question, which is the most important question of the 3. So the first question is, how did life begin? The second question is, why is there life? The third question is, what happens to life after physical death? But the fourth question, which is the most important, is who is qualified to answer the first 3 questions? Now, all of the conflict, so rather than uniting as humans or as a species and celebrating that we all have the same questions, these liar kings, these people in power, they determine and they say, only this person, only we are qualified to answer those questions. So all the wars aren't fought because we have different questions. The wars are fought over who has the right to answer those questions. And so that's what Mumbo Jumbo does. It sort of looks at all of that stuff and it says, oh, this is just the same pattern going on all the time. Now, the thing about these questions, the questions don't change. These 4 questions don't change. But the answers always change. The answers are dependent on what age you live in, what time period you live in. Because the answers to those questions have to keep pace with the nature of existence. So if you have like a religion for example, they were saying the earth was flat, and then knowledge increased, where people figured out, oh, the earth isn't really flat, then that philosophy or religion or that science had to change to keep up with the understanding of the nature of existence, man's understanding about the nature of existence. Otherwise, it becomes obsolete and not useful.
So, Dr. Mumbo
what's
Jumbo, let me ask a question. So, as a group, has the information or what you just said where are we in that paradigm as the group?
Could you explain? Give me the question again. Say it again.
In what you just said, the point that you just made, that the technology didn't keep up, the religion, the world was flat, then more information came to find out that it was how whatever said the story it is now. Where are we as a group in that paradigm?
Well, where we're at is that because of the way colonization happened, we had all these stories. We had answers to all of these questions. We had answers to all of these. But through colonization, the answers were not passed down to us. Our languages were destroyed. We were given their answers, their values. We were given colonial religions, colonial values, and things like that. So we have lost our heritage answers to those. So we are in the process of, that's why I said that line, reawakening, coming back home to nature. We are in the process of re-answering those questions for ourselves. That's where we are right now.
Dr. Mumbo Jumbo.
Did that answer your question, Nisi? Yes, sir.
Hey, Dr.
Yes.
Mumbo Jumbo, I also want to ask you, this Rick, I was wanting to ask you if you could kind of explain what you mean by race and habitat. You want to kind of explain what you mean by habitat, and why is it more important that we go to the habitat and not the race? You know, why is habitat more important than race?
Okay. I'll give you an example. Let's say your body, Rick. Let's say your body you have your body, right? And then
right.
Your fingers, then you have you have 10 fingers, right?
Right.
And so your fingers say, we're the finger race. We're no longer Rick. We're the finger race. And so, the index fingers are going to compete with the middle fingers, and the thumb's going to compete with them. And we're going to compete to see who can get the most control over the rest of the body. Knowing that the fingers can't really exist without the body. So before we had this concept of the colonial concept of race, we did not identify. We identified ourselves with the habitat and the way, because we knew Mama Earth was our mother, and we knew that we were earthlings, just like the rest of the earthlings. We called the tree people. We called the bear people. We called a certain kind of plant people. They were people just like we were people. We all respected each other as earthlings of equal value in the habitat. We respected and we honored it because we all got life from Mama Earth. Now, the concept of race, that's the concept where you separate yourself mentally and emotionally from the habitat. So rather than being in harmony and have the mentality or the emotional thing that you're going to sustain the habitat because you're part of it, and anything that happens to the habitat impacts you, you know it, and you also feel it. But when you separate the human race and you elevate them above the habitat as a separate entity, species, or concept, then the race can do anything. Then the race has the opportunity to exploit or damage the habitat and not feel anything and not feel bad about it. Have you noticed, like in colonial lexicon or in language, Rick, we have the human race, right? Have you ever heard of the tree race? Have you ever heard of the chicken race or the canine race?
Right. Matter of fact, that was an excellent explanation, Dr. Mumbo. I got to give you props on that. That's an excellent explanation.
Right. So that race thing is that to get us competing. That thing is that we're in a race because we have to compete, and we're competing against each other on who can extract and exploit the most materialism out of the earth to the detriment of the habitat. So when you think of yourself as a race, colonialism, listen, the whole premise behind colonialism is exploiting indigenous habitats. So it can be, and that includes every member of the habitat, from humans to water to air to birds to insects to trees. The whole concept of colonialism is based on going to an indigenous place where you're not there and exploiting every last drop of value you can out of it till there's nothing left.
Wow.
Well, that's what that's based on. That's the whole underlying energy behind that paradigm.
Area code 256-849-2227. African Americans Ain't African Radio. We're here with Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, and I know we got some questions from the audience. So is there anybody who's feeling what this American is putting down? Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, when we talk about critical thinking skills, what are some of the things that we should be doing first? What are some of the things that we should be waking up every day or going to bed with every night? What should we be doing?
Well, this is what you need to do. When you're thinking, when you're looking at somebody, when you're having a thought, when you have a story, the first thing, if I could get you to get anything in your paradigm first, is that you are a story. Everything is a story. So I'll tell you even the opposite. This is how colonialism is the exact opposite of natural or indigenous people or natural way of being. Like, for example, in colonial religion or colonial spiritual reality, what do you always do? You seek what? You seek answers, right? You're always going through some sort of pilgrimage or some sort of prayer. You're always asking, what is the answer? What is the answer? What is the answer? You know? But in indigenous spirituality, you don't seek the answers, you seek the questions. Because you know that the answers are self-evident. So whatever is going on, and what's going on is the answer. So what you really need to do is understand what questions are driving that behavior. And then when you understand those questions, you can change that part of the story. You can change the context, and then different outcomes will come. And I know that's sort of advanced, and there's other things that we can get to for that. But I would say realizing that everything is a story, your story is first. So if you're evaluating somebody else's mumbo jumbo, I don't care what it is, you're evaluating somebody's mumbo jumbo. The first thing you should do is say, okay, is this mumbo jumbo, especially in the time that we're living in, is this mumbo jumbo focused on the habitat? Is it focused on healing the habitat? Or is it focused on race? Or is it focused on materialism? Or is it focused on religion or consumerism or something like that? So if it's focused on any of those other things, that should be like a little warning, like say, hey, if this mumbo jumbo isn't focused on healing the habitat and restoring the habitat, I don't really want to spend a lot of time and energy on it. Because the habitats are in such a state that's where, as indigenous people, if we really are indigenous, that's what we should be focused on. And let me, Jonathan, let me clarify. Let me say one thing here on this point while I'm thinking of it, is that I see on Facebook, I see a lot of human race activity, and it's like the indigenous people think that there's a prize. It's like all these indigenous people, especially in the Amarika habitat, it's like they're racing to win the prize, trying to be recognized as the original people of this habitat.
Yes.
And then they go back and forth, wasting time and energy. We're the first. We were here first. We're the first. We're the first. You know what? The only reward for really being the first people means that you bear most of the responsibility for everything that's happened here, and you bear most of the responsibility as the original part of the habitat for changing things.
Right.
Right.
So instead of wasting the energy talking about who's first, the true first people aren't going to be doing that. True indigenous people aren't, because they don't have time for that. They're going to be thinking, because they know. It's like when I was talking to a few weeks ago, I was talking to some of the trees, and they've been kind enough, or merciful enough, or gracious enough. They made some introductions, so I started getting more I guess what's the word? More sharing with some of the elements, particularly the winds and the water. Because that's sort of new for me. I know trees and animals, but elements are on a whole different level than animals and plants. Elements they're different. They're just a different type of being. They're different type of beings. But but one of the things I learned is that who do you think the rest of the earthling, the non-human earthlings in a particular habitat, the American habitat, who do you think they expect to right all of the mess that human beings have done? Do you think the trees and the deer and the flies think it's their responsibility to right all the craziness, all the GMOs and all the pollutions that humans are doing?
No.
They're first looking to the true indigenous people. And they're wondering, why are y'all acting like colonials instead of you're part of the habitat? Why are you in this race with the humans?
Right.
Why aren't you protecting the habitat? Why aren't you working with us? Are y'all really that dense?
We have a question, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. We have a question. Alicia?
Yes, I do. Well, it's more of a comment, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. Thank you for actually presenting tonight. So I have a comment because of something that I saw on Facebook, which is social media, meaning that anyone that's on the World Wide Web that has access to Facebook could possibly see a comment. And I don't know if anyone in the audience has seen it, but there was a post about a casting call out for this new Straight Outta Compton movie that's coming out. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was some turmoil or ill feelings felt because of the classifications that the casting call folks put people in that they were looking for, meaning that alluding to some of the things that we've been talking about in this forum about describing what we look like, who we look like, and what determines that class, kind of like race. This is where you fall and this is where you fall. So my response to the person that actually put the post up is, when you say certain words, you have to know what you're saying. You think it, which is the reason why you say it. And when you say things, it becomes your actions. And your actions are who you are. It just describes who you are, whether you are part of the habitat or not. If you're not, it's because you're not doing what you're supposed to do in order to be considered a part of the habitat. So the races and those type of terminologies have been embedded in us for so long. I can remember from kindergarten hearing and being taught certain things. So that's a statement. My question to you is, how do we begin the brainwashing or the brain cleansing to help people think differently so that they will speak differently and that they will act differently?
Okay. The relationship. Here's a simple mumbo jumbo principle about behaviors. First, there's a story. And those stories that we say all of the time, whether they're ours or somebody else's, those stories create emotions. And those emotions are what drive our behaviors. So when you see behaviors that don't honor the habitat, which are self-destructive, which are whatever thing that is not ideal or sustainable, when you see non-sustainable or disrespectful behaviors, those behaviors are driven by emotions that are driven by stories. So that's why changing the stories and storytelling is so critical. We have to be responsible for telling our own stories. We can almost assume, not almost, we can assume that there is not one colonial story that is in the best interest of the habitat. You know, if colonialism cared about preserving the habitat, the indigenous habitat, they would not be in it if they really valued it, because they cannot be in it without destroying it. So, stories... Go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go ahead and finish what you were saying.
So I said that taking responsibility for our own stories, and it doesn't, we can't make it a big thing. It's just what I said. Stories create emotion. And especially with us being so emotional soul people, more than any other people, our emotions drive our behaviors. So if we want to change behaviors, we have to change emotions. And then we do that by changing the story.
That makes a lot of sense. I agree.
And
I wanted to ask you, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the stories and everything, but being that we've already been told the story and a lot of us have basically went for those stories that come from other folks, what is the importance of, when we start telling our own stories, what's the importance of those stories being true? Because, I mean, if they're not true, then we probably have a hard time trying to convince anybody.
Well, you know what? Truth is an interesting concept. Truth is an interesting concept, Rick. And this is another, that's a good, I'm glad you brought that up. So, let me get back to text one moment. Let me get to text. I forgot to say one thing about text. Anytime, the only reason, me included, the only reason people write something down is because they want to control the movement of living beings, of humans. That's the only reason people write something down. They're writing that down because they want to put a story in your head that's going to create emotion, that's going to drive your behavior so they can predict it and manipulate. Now, everything that's written down, text has a very narrow bandwidth. Text it's a very narrow bandwidth. So and everybody knows, if you communicate with somebody via text messaging, you get more information when you talk to them on the phone because you can hear their inflection and their voice and some of the attitudes. You get even more information when you talk to them in person, where you can not only hear them, but you can see them and you can feel the energy. So compared to that level of exchange of information, text is very, very narrow. And the other thing about text is that text, anytime you look at text, anything that's written down, first thing you ask yourself, I know that the only reason that this person wrote this down was to implant a story in me that's going to create an emotion to control my behavior. And so you have to ask yourself, what is that person's agenda? Why did they do that? You know, what is their purpose for trying to give me this story? And that's the critical thinking part. And the other thing you have to realize about text is always past tense. So, real life is in the now. But as soon as you write it down, it's what one person thought, the way things work, it's one person's version or perspective of the truth at a point in time that's in the past. As soon as they wrote it down, it's a different moment. And those set of circumstances might no longer exist. And so truth, you balance. To me, truth is it consistent with the nature of existence? So if you say something and it balances out with nature bears witness to it. You see, this is how nature works. This is how creation works. Then you can sort of say it's the truth. And that's why I say that's why I get back to the questions don't change, but the answers always do. So I try not to get too hung up on the answers, because even modern science says the Mama Earth is at least 4.4 billion years old, and then human beings are what, a couple 100,000, maybe a couple million at most.
Yes.
So to be so arrogant as a new species, to think that we can comprehend the truth about the nature of existence, just our desire to even do that just shows colonial arrogance. We're not just satisfied being and existing and celebrating life as part of the habitat.
I have another question. This is Mrs. I was going to ask, because, we have our young people, and they are the most vulnerable and most susceptible to, a lot of the existing stories. And you want to put them on the path to try to find their story, or to understand the stories that have been told, these various narratives, and, to be more of a knowledge quest, and to be more, to have active inquiry. I'll put it that way. So what would you say, how would we go about something that would be tantamount to colonial immunization? How would you go about that?
Well, it's like I said, first thing you do is, if it's coming from the colonial paradigm, assume that it's against nature, right? If it's coming from colonialism, assume that the purpose of it is to exploit indigenous resources. That's why it exists. So assume that, right? And so then, the thing is that we've become so lazy and complacent as a people. We think it's a big chore to create our own stories. We think it's a big chore to create stories for our children, because we're so used to getting them fed by our colonial masters. Trust me, those stories that they create that we eat up, that's a lot of work. They're not sitting around. They're not sitting around, twiddling their thumbs. They're doing a lot of work around the clock to come up with some stories and contingencies to keep their stories going. They got whole universities, institutions built on preserving their stories. They got whole media and networks and songs and movies preserving their stories. So what do we think? We think we're going to immunize ourselves against all that without effort and without work? No. The way you do that is you put the work in.
Put the work in.
You put the work in, and that's why I talk about the three critical skills are critical knowing, critical thinking, and critical doing. There's just some things as a collective we have to start doing to start living in more harmony with habitat. But that's all beyond the scope of this, introductory sort of mumbo jumbo thing. It's beyond the scope of the introductory stuff. But yeah, we got to put the work in. It's
Yes.
work. And saying I don't know how. Just listen. Again, listen. That was a great question. This is another key concept. When you have a question, assume if that question came to you, assume that you are the answer. Don't assume somebody else is the answer. Don't assume somebody else has the answer. If that question came to you, the only reason that question came to you is because you have part of the answer, or the answer, for you. You just have to put the work in to develop it, just like they do.
Okay.
Did
Excellent.
I answer your question?
Excellent. Excellent. I'm taking notes.
Area code 256-849-2227. We're here with Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, if the people wanted to get with you, pick up some of your music, take a class, get more information, how do they contact you?
Of course, I'm on Facebook, drmumbojumbo.com. You can hit my page up or inbox me there. You can also get me at drmumbojumbo@gmail.com. I also have a blog, WordPress. It's drmumbojumbo.wordpress. You can get there, and I have some materials there and some things like that. I am going to be, after talking to Carrie and stuff, I'm going to be getting some stuff together to do some classes to get more in-depth in some of these concepts. Because, I'm starting to realize that, like, when I post stories and stuff up, and I don't get much action on the stories or much comments, I'm starting to think that, well, maybe people don't get the stories. Because, family and friends I talk to, they see the stories. And I know it takes them a while. And I've been talking to them about some of these mumbo-jumbo concepts for years. And even then, it takes them a while because the stories that I write, especially like my little stories for big people, those I created those stories specifically to create new neural pathways in your thinking, to create new paradigms that challenge and break down colonial thinking. So I intentionally put those things in. So that's why you read, and that's why, like, if you read something that seems like, man, this is hard to read, but it's not that it's hard. It's not so much that it's hard to read because the words are hard. It seems hard and it seems like a slow read because it's difficult to use colonial concepts and comprehend it. And that's intentional.
What are some of the ways we can resist this? How do we give ourselves a colonial immunization?
Okay, well, first of all, you recognize it and you ask yourself the question. So, what we say, one thing you need to do is you assume if it's from colonialism, it's anti-habitat. I don't care how nice they dress it up. It's still going to be anti-habitat. Second thing is that if you have a question, you take the responsibility for that question that came to you. And that gets into the critical knowing. So, without getting into that, let me just say one thing about critical knowing. One thing that colonialism emphasizes is thinking. Thinking and not knowing. Knowing is your natural instinct. Has anybody seen that like my Facebook timeline cover? I got a picture of me with Anita at Sholom Beach and a Falachito, but basically with a wolf, a bear, and a raven. And it's a story about three animal spirits. And briefly, because of the times that we're living in, Mother Nishola, mother, a wolf mother, animal spirit came and said, look, if you are going to survive during this time with the changes that are going on in the solar system, the frequencies and stuff like that, and with the things that are happening in the habitat and environmental, like, these are three lessons you need to learn. And the first lesson you need to learn is to follow your instincts. Trust your nature. Trust your instincts. And that's what I was saying to you. If you have that question, trust your instincts. So does everybody know how memory works? There's something that memory can be, without getting too technical, let's say that there's recall and there's recognition. Recall is stuff that you get because you've learned it, you remember practicing it, and you've done it before, you know? But that instinct and trusting your instinct and nature, it's stuff that you haven't necessarily experienced, but it's when you are in that environment, you recognize it because it's who you are naturally. It's stuff that you came to the planet with. And so trusting that more than trusting that intellectual, analyzing, thinking thing. Because a lot of times we know what we should do. I guarantee you, everybody on this call got up this morning, you thought about eating something. You knew you should have eaten it, or you knew you shouldn't have eaten it. You were going to go somewhere in the path you took to go somewhere. You knew you should have did one thing, and you knew you shouldn't have done something else. That was that nature, that instinct. But we're so taught to diminish that and to rationalize with Western colonial thinking and Greek logic and stuff like that. We're taught to process everything and to ignore that. So that's what the wolf was coming to teach. You know, wolf, hey, trust your instincts. And wolves are pack animals. They always operate together. That. And so first lesson, you trust your instincts. Second lesson, from Anita, the bear mother. She says, trust your strength. You always have enough strength to do what your instincts are telling you to do. So, thinking that you are powerless, you might not have political power. You might not have economic power. You might not have, electrical power, but you always have enough power. You always have enough strength to do what your instincts, what you know you should do. Now, is there anybody on this call that knew that there was something that they should do? I'm not talking about next week or 2 years from now, but if there's anybody on this call that knew they should have did something today and they did not have the power to do it, the strength to do it. Okay, so you trust your instincts, you trust your nature, first lesson. Second lesson, you trust that you have the strength to follow your instincts. I'm not talking about, you might not have the strength to do what you think you should do. You have the strength to do what you know you should do. Okay? And then the third lesson, which is the hardest, Falachito, the raven, she comes to teach you to trust your voice. And you say, trust your voice? Yes, trust your voice, because there are so many voices in this colonial paradigm that we're taught to diminish our true voice. Or we think that we shouldn't say something. We think that we shouldn't do something. We think that we're not good enough. And all of that stuff is by judging ourselves by colonial standards, not natural habitat standards. And so you trust your instincts, you trust your strengths, and then you trust your voice. That your voice, your answer to the question is what's needed right now. And it's because, ravens, everybody has songbirds, right? Everybody knows about songbirds. They sing all beautiful. They create the energy for life and activity and stuff like that. It's very pleasant, very soothing. They create that really creative, let's get going energy in the morning. But a raven, their song is kind of harsh and jolting, right? But they have a different purpose. Their purpose is to sound the alarm. When an intruder or a hunter or a threatening thing comes into the forest, the raven sees it and they set out the warning call that everybody responds to. So a raven isn't supposed to sound like a songbird. And a lot of times you got indigenous ravens that want to sound like quote unquote colonial songbirds. And we judge ourselves and we let that paralyze what we know we should do.
Area code 256-849-2227. We're here with Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, let me see. Last time, I'm going to let you run it. Anybody have any questions for the brother? Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, the floor is yours.
All right, you know what I'm going to do? Since you, that clip you had with, I'm going to just read a couple clips, just a couple short excerpts. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Dr. Mumbo Jumbo's American Manifesto, okay? And this will sort of tie in with what Dr. Wright was saying at the beginning. A battle may be won with superior equipment, tactics, and warriors. But peace is only created and sustained by superior storytellers. Just because I may not possess the physical resources to win a war does not mean I'm not sufficiently equipped to win the peace. So may all the living dead resurrect themselves to life. Some of us will have our free life in our habitat. The question is, will you? So our stories are our heritage. Our stories fueled by our soul power and our energy are what not only the rest of the habitat is waiting for, but what the rest of humanity, what the other races are waiting for, the races that are in our habitat anyway. That's what they're lacking. Okay? And also, I'm going to give you another little short poem just to kind of emphasize the colonial thinking and how it works against them. This is called Obama and Bacon. All right? Well, I woke up in a cold sweat inside of their nightmare. I found myself surrounded by men who didn't care that I am an American man with salvation in my hand. They said, "You who? Darky, darky? We don't understand. All you'll need for consternation. Won't you have some Obama and bacon? And we will put you back to sleep. Why won't you eat your Obama and bacon so we can put you back to sleep?" They said, "Now we lay you down to sleep. We try our best your soul to keep. If you should wake before you die, we'll ease your pain with shiny lies that make you want to be like us. For 30 silver, you can trust. You'll trade your heritage will turn to dust. You'll trade your love for our lust. If you just have some more Obama and bacon, we could put you back to sleep. Just a little more Obama and bacon, and you'll fall right back to sleep." That's how colonialism works.
I have a question for Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, please.
Pardon?
I am thoroughly enjoying learning about stories. Thank you very much for bringing attention to that. The poetry stories are phenomenal, and I understand them, but I am an adult. My question is, do you have stories or are thinking about creating stories for our babies so that they too can understand and can learn?
Yes, I have stories. I call them my stories for smart teens and adults are little stories for big people. My stories for children are big stories for little people. And most of my stories I do orally. I tell them orally. When I'm invited someplace, I tell them orally, like at Mother Earth festivals and stuff like that. When people invite me, you do stuff like that. You know what? And part of the reason that I haven't taken the time to, well, there's a lot of reasons I haven't taken the time to write them down. But with an audience and with people that want them, I can do that.
I think that those will be great gifts, if you will, because anything that you give someone that can help improve their consciousness and improve their lives is a gift. And I have grandchildren. I would love to share your stories with my grandchildren. So if there's a place where I could buy them, download them, whatever, I am definitely interested in that, because my understanding and what I think is we have to start with the youngest of us all, and it's with the children. So
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I have a couple series like the Garden of Love series and stuff like that, and I have music for children also. Now, if you go to like Amazon or iBooks, I have a story called Dr. Mumbo Jumbo in Time, and that's a really good story to sort of introduce you to some really basic, reinforce some sort of mumbo jumbo paradigm thinking and some decolonization thinking in there. And I'm also going to create a course based on that Dr. Mumbo Jumbo in Time to help people create their own story with time. So, like, for example, it would be like Rick in Time or Buck Wylam in Time, or Nietzsche in Time, to walk people through that same process. Because a lot of times, that's another thing that the human race, the race focus does, is that we get into this mindset that our biggest obstacle and our biggest challenge are other races, and that we collectively have to do that. But the thing that we have to do is realize that collectively the biggest challenge we have is overcoming our use of time. Because there is nothing we can't do or fix, very little that we can't do, if we would use our time responsibly. And that's why that first book I decided, out of all the stories I had, I decided to do release Dr. Mumbo Jumbo in Time first. Because to me, the first lesson that we have to learn, if you're going to get out of this colonial paradigm, is what is our relationship with time? And how do we overcome wasting so much of our time doing things that aren't in our best interest or in the best interest of the habitat? And so I encourage anybody and everybody to go to iBooks, go to Amazon. It's only $1.99 and get Dr. Mumbo Jumbo in Time. Read that. If you have any questions, you might have to read it. It's really short, but you might have to reread it a few times. And read it, and there's enough stuff in sort of each paragraph where you could like to read a couple of paragraphs and stop and let those principles work in your mind and go on. So it's not a contest to see if you can speed read it.
We have a few callers. Go ahead. We have a few callers on the line. No one? Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, you have the floor.
Well, let me just... Oh, you know what? Another great exercise people can do if you talk about decolonizing. Now, of course, let's take the Bible. Let's take the New Testament. Let's take the Bible. Now, of course, the most effective lies are the ones that are based on truth. Or at least, when I say truth, I mean they use principles, true principles about the nature of existence, true principles about the nature of humans or people. So, a good exercise to do is when you read something about the New Testament, you can read like Hebrews 11 or something like that, whatever Bible stuff you read, it doesn't really matter. But anytime you see the word faith, I want you to replace that with the word technology. Because we all know what technology is, right?
Why don't you explain it to him, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo?
Technology is being able to take a principle or a truth about the nature of existence and you mechanize it, or you come to a level of proficiency with it so that you can leverage that principle on demand anytime you want. That's what technology is, and that's what faith is. So I know a lot of us have backgrounds in church or some religion, and they all talk about faith. And the reason they all talk about faith is because faith is technology. It's a mental technology. It's a story technology. To give you an example, okay, like if you go into your house and you cut your light on, when you say I'm going to cut your light on, you're not hoping that light comes on, do you? You know that light is going to come on. So, and the reason that light is going to come on is because somebody figured out the technology how to leverage a natural power in the earth called electricity. And they leveraged it and mechanized it, so every time you flick that switch, it comes on. And if it doesn't come on, it's not hard to figure out why, because they know how it works.
Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, let me ask you a question. You just said about electricity, the electricity in the earth. Is that, since you said that was mechanized years ago, are we up to date where we can take, if we're connected to this environment, if we're connected into this habitat, are those things that you said, electricity, harnessing electricity, and I'm sure there's other things that the audience knows about, isn't that a way we can take that energy if we're connected to the environment and the habitat?
Well, I mean, we do use it now, but we do it through wires and stuff like that. You know, but
right,
there are other ways to do it too.
Yes,
yes.
Yes.
And so, that's the beauty of the nature of existence, and that's the beauty of Mumbo Jumbo, is that if you understand, it's not a mystery, it's not magic. There's no magic. There's nothing supernatural. Supernatural is what people call stuff, natural stuff that they don't understand. And like the process, the way that we learn as a species, when we get to something that we don't understand, we mystify it. We create a mysticism about it so that we can imagine it. And then when we imagine it, we create that mysticism, and by dwelling on it, we create the stories, and we figure out how to mechanize it. We figure out how to make it technology. We figure out how to make it safe so that it works every time. So that's why that imagination and that exploring and that creativity that you talked about is so important. And we should never stifle that in children. We should never stifle that in ourselves, because that's how revelation, that's how we evolve, and that's how we heal, and that's where the solutions, that's where the answers come from. Because like I said, we are the answers. We are the answers to the questions. And we have to stop looking for answers outside of ourselves so much.
Area code 256-849-2227. AfricanAmericans-Ain't-African.org. Come support us over at AfricanAmerican-Ain't-African.org. We're on Facebook in the African American Ain't African room. Try to post a lot of pictures. You try to post a lot of pictures of indigenous people. The people are starting to bring in more pictures, drawings, and just the whole history of America. So the youth are bringing in a lot of stuff. So come and check us out. Come join us over at African Americans Ain't African and Facebook. Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, in closing, how?
Hello? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. No. So what are some of the things that regular people can do when we're to have our thinking on point, so we can have that critical thinking skills down? What are some of the words that we can say, when we're out and about, when we're running into people all day long? What are some of the techniques that we can do?
One thing you can do, and you don't have to talk to other people about this if you want to, but it's a great exercise. Just start saying the word humanity or humanity instead of humans. Get in your mind to start breaking that colonial patriarchal paradigm that everything revolves around the male, because that's not natural. Life doesn't come from men like that. That's just not, and we're not separate like that. If we say humans, then we are male and female. We are created as one life system in one habitat. That's that. So that was that. Emphasize stories. If you are feeling a way, you don't like how you feel, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling a way that you don't, I want you to stop and listen to what story you're telling yourself. Your healthy bodies come from eating healthy food and getting proper rest. Healthy bodies come from good food and nutrition. Healthy emotions come from good stories. If you don't have good emotions, it's because you're not telling yourself good stories. Period. It's not, and and colonial white people will make psychology, they'll make it all big and all these other things. It could be like food and diet and other chemical things too. But I'm saying in general, they try to make stuff so complicated because they use that intellectual Western, Plato, all those dudes, Socrates stuff, But basically, it's simple. It's simple. If you're not feeling good, it's because you're not telling yourself good stories. And I'm not saying you have to make stuff up. This ain't no secret stuff. I'm not talking about no secret stuff. I'm talking about in every situation you're in, there is a story you can tell yourself about that real situation that's going to leave you feeling empowered and energized instead of defeated. And if you tell yourself good stories, you don't really have to worry about your behaviors because they're going to follow. Because a lot of times people the mistake we make is we try to change our actions without changing our emotions. And you can't change your actions without changing your story. Because if you say, okay, I'm just going to start doing this, but if you don't start telling yourself the stories that are going to give you the emotional energy to be consistent doing what you want to do, it's not going to work. So whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is you should do, write down the stories that give you the emotional energy that make you feel like you can do that you can stay with it. And the stories that make you feel like you can't, systematically remove them from that radio or that voice that's always playing in your head. That's a practical thing to do. And those are big things. Those take practice. Those take skill. That's why I talk about critical skill. It's not just knowledge, it's skill.
Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, could you please share your information, email, and how the audience can contact you for further review?
Okay, my Facebook page is Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. My Twitter handle is Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. WordPress is Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. I am working on a website which will have courses and curriculums and things on that. And I'm just trying to get my partners lined up for some of those services. And if you read, and when you go to my blog, or if I post a story or something on Facebook, and if you don't understand it, please ask a question, because I'll elaborate and I'll talk about the symbolism in it. I'll talk about like the story I got from 3 Shillong Beach. That's a Chata word, It's a Chata word, which is the base language for Choctaw and Chickasaw, And so I use those words as much as possible because those words have different energy. And like in advanced mumbo jumbo, that's why I'd also explain to you that words are containers for energy. And sometimes that's the reason we do so much slang, is because sometimes our energy doesn't fit well in Western colonial words, because English is not a very emotional language. That's why we're always twisting it up with slang and stuff like that. We're trying to create words that can contain our emotions.
Yes.
So Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, are you saying that we can look forward to a Mumbo Jumbo language?
Well, you know what, Rick? I say all languages are Mumbo Jumbo, Rick. That's the beauty of Mumbo Jumbo. But as far as like the basics of Mumbo Jumbo and some of the stuff I'm talking about, like Mumbo Jumbo principles and frameworks for critical knowing, critical thinking, and critical doing, I'm definitely, like the 7 steps, like to survive emotional genocide, I'm going to put all that stuff together and make that stuff available. To me, I've always had a bunch of Mumbo Jumbo. I just haven't had the demand because, I haven't been around some people that were awakening like y'all, and so a lot of people are like, what? Or no reaction. Oh, and sisters. Let me say something to the sisters. Sisters, I put up a. Go ahead, Rick.
Oh no, all I was gonna say was where I just hope that African Americans and African is a good forum for you to say, and I hope a lot of people catch on, through us. And good luck in the future.
Rick, Rick, you don't know, Rick, you don't know just how much African Americans have, and Africans have encouraged me because, I wrote some stuff like a few years back when my ancestor Paul T was telling me that people were going to be waking up. When I was feeling like, at least the people around me, that I was feeling sort of like the oddball out. They're feeling like the raven with all the songbirds. And just seeing all of this come and everybody, I could see a lot of stuff of how it fits together because I'm a dreamer. I'm a dreamer. And if we were in our traditional habitat, in our traditional social system, I would be the dreamer and the medicine man. I go to the dream world. I spend time in the dream world. I get stuff there. I come back out and I talk to that. I bring that information back to the waking world. That's what I do.
Well, yes, sir. Well, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, thank you for sharing with us tonight. You got to come back.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you, brother, and Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, y'all.
Oh, I forgot. Wait, let me say that one thing. For the sisters, what I was saying.
Oh.
For the sisters, I put a post up, and you can go to my website. I have a T-shirt of what I'm calling the American Sister. And it's and I created that T-shirt. I created some T-shirts with some illustrations, especially that particular T-shirt. That's what I'm going to release first, to capture the spirit, the essence, the beauty, the grace, the wisdom of how I see our sisters once they really blossom and awaken back to their true position. And so you can go to my Facebook page and look at that, and Rick, I'll send it to Carrie, and Carrie can post it in the group. And so I'm saying, if you like that shirt, just send me an email, inbox or something to let me know what size you want, if I'm going to pre-order them, because I'm not going to order a bunch of them if people aren't feeling it. But I think if you see it, and if you look at the expression on the face, I think it's really going to touch every sister. And because I spent a long time working with the illustrator and making modifications and stuff like that, just to capture the spirit and that essence of like the epitome of the sister, of how I see our enlightened American sisters, what you see it. So go to that. I'm going to make sure that Carrie posts that tonight.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. Nisi, what do you think?
I think that this was an outstanding show, and my takeaway is that we are the ones that we've been truly waiting for. That never meant anything to me. I've heard that before, but I can see that there's truth in it. It resonated and with me from Dr. Mumbo Jumbo. That's what I got out of it.
Rick. Rick on the floor. Rick on the floor.
Yeah, you're coming in broken. Hey, I just wanted to say that it was a joy having Dr. Mumbo Jumbo on the show, and I've learned a whole lot from just this particular program. I really enjoyed this, and I hope that all the people out there enjoyed it too, because it got me thinking. I'm mesmerized, and I just want to I can't thank Dr. Mumbo Jumbo enough for bringing all this to our attention.
Well, Rick, that's what we're trying to do. Just bring some information, man. These things can manifest itself. And Dr. Mumbo Jumbo is an excellent, like he said, he's a dreamer. We gotta have some of our essence. We have to pull on some of our own essence if we're going to survive. So check Dr. Mumbo Jumbo out. He has a blog. Go ahead.
Oh, those who didn't hear that because you came in kind of broken. He was just telling y'all, to be on the lookout for Dr. Mumbo Jumbo in the future. And since Buck is having a little technical difficulties right now, I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And again, thank you, Dr. Mumbo Jumbo, for being on the show. And for myself, Rick Moon, Niecy Lachelle, and Buck Wylam. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Jack, okay. Good night.